I just want to say thank you so much for your exhibition. It's really wonderful. I went to see it in Limerick recently and was really struck by the way all of the individual works, that they stand alone as individual pieces, and yet collectively they make a really interesting, cohesive core concept. Can you tell us a little about that overarching concept of the exhibition?
Thanks, Yvonne. Great to see you this morning as well. The core of the concept would have come really from my obsession with architecture and really our bodies in that space. And to kind of reduce it down, what I was looking at is the corporate skin of contemporary architecture, which is really quite sheer, and how it's reflecting within our how we manipulate our bodies within various spaces. I see buildings really as part of our identity. I mean, we look at archaeologists and they, identify people in the past by the remains of their buildings and other things. But I felt that this thing between the building and our skin, something really important, and it crossed several barriers that I feel are really contemporary at the moment. And it was to do with cosmetic and pharmaceutical and medical. And the incredibly very good description by Paul Presidio, he calls it the era of the pharmacopornographic. And I think that fits really where my interests lie. So that might sound too much of a mouthful further, but it's kind of surface and then in depth as well.
Yeah, that's very interesting. So it's projecting a kind of an image and then using a certain kind of language in order to kind of validate it in a way. Well, I was interested in what you're saying there about the architecture and the relationship between the body and architecture, because in your video, Skin Deep, I noticed that you've got the human body and also elements of ancient architecture in there as well, I think maybe collaged in. Can you tell us a little bit about that video, which has, it's the title piece in a sense, Skin Deep, and some of the ideas that are brought out in that through the various materials?
Yeah, I use the tropes of ancient architecture, and it's totally taken from contemporary magazines for high-end cosmetics and high-end perfumes. And they, again, use the language of architecture. They use the Greek pillars. They use all of these sort of subliminal signs to say that this is really, the business. So it's that sort of subjective sense and identification with architecture. So I really just wholesale collage in the film from magazines, and all the figures that are in the film that are painted in animal fat are all taken from high-end fashion cosmetic type magazines.
Tell me why you use animal fat. That's intriguing and unusual kind of paint to use.
It's pretty smelly because you have to melt it, and it's pretty disgusting. And I painted on Perspex, so I know you called it a video, and it is a digital video, but I consider it a film because it's made up of stills, but it's made up of analog and digital, physical films and digital pixels as well. But why the animal fat? It was really to do with that notion that of our bodies as well, and our skin under our skin is so dependent on a really nice layer of fat underneath. And it's that incredible pull between the contemporary understanding of fat and how it's abhorred, how it's thought to be quite awful and disgusting, and particularly anything removed from the body. When we remove it from the body, it becomes even more objectionable. So it's just really using it in a very seductive way. So it's getting something that was considered pretty horrible in contemporary times, and using it in a way that was, I hope, really seductive.
Yeah, that's good. That's very interesting as well. And there's certain parallels between the ideas of fat and the oil, which appears in the works, that you use it both as a material for making the work as well as subject matter. And then this idea of the kind of mechanical oil versus the kind of oils and emollients that come into the cosmetic industry as well. And that brought me to a particular work that Après Eileen Gray, this fascinating 6-panel screen, which seems to make a reference both to Eileen Gray and yet has something to say in its own right, with this really striking pink color, and then these globules, these dark globules rising across the piece from the lower left up to the upper right. Can you just tell us about the use of oil in that work and how
well, I think screen is really important, because screen has so many, it has multiple layered meanings. So the screen in architecture, the screen in film, the flat screen, the screen as well in fashion industry, it's huge. And even screening clothes are perhaps you could interpret them as a type of a screen. So screen, I would see it as multi-layered. But Eileen Gray particularly, I think, used the screen in ways that were incredibly revolutionary and very much associated with the physical body in scale. So that screen is an exact replica of one of her screens, except for the finish. And the black globules, as you were saying, when you reference the film I use waste mechanical oil, which is so alluring, but so disgusting to actually work with. And then the images that are on the screen, those globules come from medical magazines, which advertise sort of this microscopic beauty, this invisible beauty, and also manipulation of skin.
And then arising out of that idea, there's a really interesting smaller collage piece, which is also based on a type of screen that was pioneered by Eileen Gray. But it appears to be, I think it's kind of blocks, which suggest body parts. And as I understand it, these were kind of cut out of magazines that they reflect kind of ideas of cosmetic surgery, but also tie in with this concept that you're exploring.
Yeah, Yvonne, that's really interesting. That was one of the kind of breakthrough works for me doing this, because I used cosmetic magazines for that particular work. It's called Sensory Block Screen, after Eileen Gray. Yeah. And when I was cutting into the magazine of the skin, in the magazine, it has a very weird sensation of cutting into real skin. It's something quite unsettling and quite uncanny. And then I put them together in a way that you couldn't tell which body parts they were, and they look quite pornographic, although they're just from faces and hands in cosmetic magazines. Which so it was really that sensory block, is that Gray talked about. She talked about the sensory was so important to her, as well as these incredible designs that she came up with. But all of the senses were brought to play. And Jennifer Goff's book on Eileen Gray, I think, is just the most amazing book, and goes into these things in tremendous ways. So really that block screen, while it appears quite simple, was while it's a homage in one sense to Eileen Gray, but it was also, I felt that it was really disruptive and slightly and pornographic looking and quite disturbing. But at the same time, it retained some sort of, the idea was to retain some kind of seduction with it as well. So it is the second screen, actually. I haven't realized that.
And it's kind of interesting to kind of think of the Eileen Gray's stunning objects, brilliantly designed, and using this very fine lacquered surface, so that this perfect veneer is something which she works with. But these are pieces which are inorganic, and they're intended to remain largely unchanged over long periods of time. They're heirlooms and museum pieces, but very different from the human skin, which is maybe, I think you're suggesting in the work, leaning towards the same attempt at something permanent and everlasting, in a sense, which of course, as you say, with skin, and it's an expression of humanity, and so that kind of perfection really can't have that kind of sense of something eternal.
That's really exactly what that type of idea of trying to keep skin in a way where it's in the eternal sort of frozen space, as it were, where it sort of lacks all humanity, it lacks all sense of time. It's like the veneer of an old table, or the polish on an old table, or whatever, the wear of it over time, or over a couple of generations. And so it's that denial within the human, contemporary human sort of parlance in magazine, in medical, in cosmetic, in pharmaceutical. It's this denial of of passage of time in one sense. And then just really I'm trying to unpack that and explore it. I find it quite disturbing, really, to be in spaces and places where buildings don't age, like in airports and shopping centres, where they just replace plastic panels if they're damaged. So you never see the passage of time in these spaces. So I probably find it disturbing and disorientating. Yeah. Mm.
And something of this idea then is brought out in the whole kind of sense of the process of it. So, and how the kind of locations in which procedures might take place or in which products are presented has an almost kind of votive or religious kind of quality almost. I'm just thinking of that wonderful installation piece, The Nutrient Bright Bodies, a three-dimensional piece within the exhibition. Can you tell us something about that work?
Yeah, it's very much so that idea of seduction and votive. And interestingly, a lot of the very early big shops and stores, when they opened up, they used to put the perfumery, etc., the cosmetics at the front of the shop, because there were horse-drawn carriages and horse dung outside. So if you have perfume inside, you tend to want to come into that lovely seductive smell, odor, beautiful senses. So it really was playing with that idea of it's quite vacuous. The work is quite seductive, but it's also quite vacuous. Although there are handmade pieces and castings on it, it still has those sort of tropes of that cosmetic counter in very high-end stores and high-end shops. So it really was playing with those types of things. And light, I think, is really important. The light just, there might be nothing behind light, but it's really so seductive for most humans for some reason or other. And for me,
I was fascinated by the way it was arranged in the exhibition, so that you could see one of the wall pieces behind that almost looked like the kind of image that one would pray to, or place really behind an altar, kind of altarpiece sort of. I think it was called Why Tilda Why, or Model and Madonna, or one of those pieces. Can you tell us about those pieces?
Yeah, actually, that one there is Why Tilda Why, but now to say Model and Madonna would have fitted in just as well. Their works, collage works, really using art historical references as regards their construction and their composition, I should say. They're collaged from magazines, contemporary magazines, and I remember reading Hannah Hock one time saying that sometimes she could spend years finding the right piece to go with another piece. And when I read that, it made so much sense. So yes, you have things and they may not come together for quite some time, but both of those happily came together over the last couple of years. Yeah.
Yeah, they work very well together. And one of the things that was intriguing me about both of those, or certainly about Why Tilda Why and about some of the other pieces in the exhibition, is the way the eyes and orifices are kind of blanked out. There's like a little rectangle that takes that sort of identifying element out of the image. So can you tell us about that, the use of that particular element?
Yvonne, again, when you take the scalpel out or the knife out and you cut these things out, it feels quite, again, uncanny to remove sort of very particular orifice from the face, and it really feels really strange. There were a couple of references. There were a few of them. One of them, I thought initially it was really to do with sort of giving these figures, reducing their identity or taking away their identity. But when I was looking through my notes, I saw the medical magazines where patients allow their photograph to be taken and then the eyes are blocked out so that they become anonymous. So really their identity is screened. And I felt this quite fitting for the kind of advertisements and the kind of pharmaceutical cosmetic idea, because really while they purport to be really individualistic, it's really a denial sometimes of people's identity, to my mind.
Yeah.
So,
sorry, I was just going to say, I noticed that there's almost like a series of works that come under the title Soft Structure, and then there's variations within that, but they carry a kind of a similar element, that the head is on the side, and the head and it's the head and shoulders, and they seem to be on their side as if they are in repose or lying down or some way in a submissive position. But what is presented there are very perfect individuals, but shown very close up, in a sense that you can see the pores in their skin, and there's kind of an intimacy. And I think you remarked on this idea that
yeah, Yvonne, absolutely. The magazines that show exactly as you've described, that very close up of almost a perfect other being. And my sense is then looking, through magazines again, unpacking this, what is happening here is that you're so close to these images in the magazines. The only time you get that close to somebody is with a lover or a little child or whatever, somebody you're incredibly physically close to. And the magazines use that sort of trope to seduce and pull people in to that intimacy within the magazine. So you're connected emotionally with these very close ups of another human being, and yet you don't know them at all. You have no idea who they are.
Yeah. No, I was fascinated by the way this all kind of links into the idea of the different kind of materials that you have used, and that you allude to the fats and the oils and so on, and how these are, what your exhibition seems to raise is rather the anomalies with these materials, that they have both a positive and also a critical element to it, or that society may be critical. We use the term fat, we've heard the term fat shaming, that if one doesn't conform to a certain kind of appearance, that one could be criticized for it rather than being accepted for it. And this idea that these materials can be both positive, we need oils in our bodies, we need fat as a vital element in our diet, and yet at the same time they are part of processes that involve things being discarded and going into the oceans or whatever. So there's the ecological concerns about them as well. I thought this was very contemporary and very postmodern, if you like, that it wasn't sort of saying this is bad and this is good, the baddies and the goodies, but very much about saying that there are elements that could be read in all kinds of ways. And it was really about raising the questions as opposed to providing the ready answers. I thought the exhibition was full of questions. And
oh, good. Yeah, they are for exactly the same really for me in the studio. They are. It's this incredible pull, because we're all seduced by the the various things that are being produced, but the counter of that is quite something remarkable. And it's fantastic to see the huge resurgence in or not even resurgence, but understanding, I suppose. But I just know from the time we were tinies, my mum has always been, she's really an earth person, and she spoke about Mother Earth, and in a way that was really connected. She was connected, or is connected, to the earth and the seasons. And she felt that even then, back in the 70s, that the earth was being poisoned, is what she would have termed. So I understand those ideas, and certainly they've become more and more pressing. And it is fantastic to see that interest in people understanding, I suppose, the idea of that plastic waste. And it's probably the microscopic ones that we don't see are probably, as well as the physical ones that we see in buildings, etc., and products. But it's really the skin deep thing also referred to some of the other things that are going on that are quite extraordinary on microscopic levels. But yeah, it is great to see that connection with the earth. It's tremendous. So yeah, there are more questions probably.
Yeah, well, I have loads more questions, and I'm looking forward to seeing the exhibition again when it goes to the third venue on its tour, and I'm sure that anybody going to see it will have lots of questions. So thank you very much indeed.